Island of the Blue Dolphins. Chapter 17. That night I began to make a gift for her, in return for the necklace she had given me. At first I thought I would give her a pair of my bone earrings, but remembering that her ears were not pierced and that I had a basket of abalone shells already flaked into thin discs, I set about making a circlet for her hair. I bored 2 holes in each of the discs, using thorns and fine sand. Between them I put 10 olivella shells, which were no larger than the tip of my little finger, and threaded them all together with sinew. I worked 5 nights on the circlet, and on the 5th day when she came I gave it to her, putting it around her head and tying it in the back. "Wincha," she said and hugged me. She was so pleased that I forgot how sore my fingers were from boring the holes in the hard shells. Many times she came to the cave, and then one morning she did not come. I waited for her all that day, and at dusk Jay left the cave and went to the ledge where I could watch the ravine, fearing that the men had learned that I lived here and would find me. That night I slept on the ledge. The night was cold with the first wind of winter. Tutok did not return the next day, and I remembered that it was near the time when the Aleut hunters would leave. Perhaps they had already gone. That afternoon I went to the headland. I climbed the rock and crawled across it until I could look over the rim. My heart beat loud. The Aleut ship was still there, but men were working on the deck and canoes were going back and forth. The wind blew hard and few bales of otter skins lay on the shore, so probably the ship would leave at dawn. It was dark when I got back to the ravine. Since the wind was very cold and I was no longer afraid that the Aleuts would find me, I made a fire in the cave and cooked a supper of shellfish and roots. I cooked enough for Rontu and me and for Tutok. I knew Tutok would not come, yet I put her food beside the fire and waited. Once Rontu barked and I thought I heard the sound of footsteps and went to the opening and listened. I waited a long while and did not eat. Clouds moved from the north, covering the cold sky. The wind grew louder and made wild noises in the ravine. At last I closed the mouth of the cave with stones. At dawn I went to the headland. The wind had died. Fog lay over the sea, washing against the island in gray waves. I waited a long time for a glimpse of Coral Cove, but finally the sun burned away the fog. The little harbor was deserted. The Aleut ship with its red-beaked prow and red sails had gone. At first, knowing that I could now leave the cave and move back into my house on the headland, I was happy. But as I stood there on the high rock looking down at the deserted harbor and the empty sea, I began to think of Tutok. I thought of all the times we had sat in the sun together. I could hear her voice and see her black eyes squinting closed when she laughed. Below me, Rontu was running along the cliff, barking at the screaming gulls. Pelicans were chattering as they fished the blue water. Far off I could hear the bellow of a sea elephant. But suddenly, as I thought of Tutok, the island seemed very quiet. The hunters left many wounded otter behind them. Some floated in and died on the shore, and others I killed with my spear since they were suffering and could not live. But I found a young otter that was not badly hurt. It lay in a bed of bull kelp, and I would have paddled by if Rontu had not barked. A strand of kelp was wound around its body, and I thought it was sleeping, for often before they go to sleep they anchor themselves in this way to keep from drifting off. Then I saw there was a deep gash across its back. The otter did not try to swim away as I drew near and reached over the side of the canoe. They have large eyes, especially when they are young, but this one's were so large from fear and pain that I could see my reflection in them. I cut the kelp that held it and took it to a tide pool behind the reef, which was sheltered from the waves. The day was calm after the storm, and I caught 2 fish along the reef. I was careful to keep them alive, because otter will not eat anything that is dead, and left them in the pool. This was early in the morning. That afternoon I went back to the pool. The fish had disappeared and the young otter was asleep, floating on its back. I did not try to treat its wound with herbs because salt water heals and the herbs would have washed off anyway. I brought 2 fish every day and left them in the pool. The otter would not eat while I was watching. Then I brought 4 fish and these also disappeared, and finally 6. Which seemed to be the right number. I brought them whether the day was calm or stormy. The otter grew and its wound began to heal, but still, it stayed in the pool, and now when I came it would be waiting for me and would take the fish from my hand. The pool was not big and it could easily have got out and away into the sea, yet it stayed there and slept or waited for me to come with food. The young otter now was the length of my arm and very glossy. It had a long nose that came to a point and many whiskers on each side and the largest eyes I have ever seen. They would watch me all the time I was at the pool, following me whatever I did, and when I said something, they would move around in a very funny way. In a way, too, that made pain come to my throat because they were gay and sad also. For a long time I called it otter as I had called Rantu, dog. Then I decided to give the otter a name. The name was Manani, which means little boy with large eyes. It was a hard task catching fish every day, especially if the wind was blowing and the waves were high. Once when I could catch only 2 and drop them into the pool, Manani ate them quickly and waited for more. When he found that was all I had, he swam around in circles, looking at me reproachfully. The waves were so high the next day that I could not fish on the reef even at low tide, and since I had nothing to give him I did not go to the pool. It was 3 days before I could catch fish, and when I went there again the pool was deserted. I knew that he would leave someday, but I felt bad that he had gone back to the sea and that I would never catch fish for him again. Nor would I know him if I saw him again in the kelp, for now that he had grown and his wound had healed, he looked like all the others. Soon after the Aleuts had left I moved back to the headland. Nothing had been harmed except the fence, which I mended, and in a few days the house was the same as before. The only thing that worried me was that all the abalones I had gathered in the summer were gone. I would need to live from day to day on what I could catch, trying to get enough on the days when I could fish to last through the times when I could not. Through the first part of the winter, before Manani swam away, this was sometimes hard to do. Afterwards it was not so hard, and Rantu and I always had enough to eat. While the Aleuts were on the island, I had no chance to catch little smelts and dry them, so the nights that winter were dark and I went to bed early and worked only during the day. But still I made another string for my fishing spear, many hooks of abalone shell, and last of all earrings to match the necklace Tutak had given me. These took a long time, for I searched the beach many mornings when the tide was out before I found 2 pebbles of the same color as the stones in the necklace and soft enough to cut. The holes in the earrings took even more time, for the stones were hard to hold, but when I was done and had rubbed them bright in fine sand and water, and fastened them with bone hooks to fit my ears, they were very pretty. On sunny days I would wear them with my cormorant dress and the necklace, and walk along the cliff with Rantu. I often thought of Tutak, but on these days especially I would look off into the north and wish that she were here to see me. I could hear her talking in her strange language and I would make up things to say to her and things for her to say to me. Spring again was a time of flowers and water ran in the ravines and flowed down to the sea. Many birds came back to the island. Tainer and Larai built a nest in the tree where they were born. They built it of dry seaweed and leaves and also with hairs off Rantu's back. Whenever he was in the yard while it was being made, they would swoop down if he were not looking and snatch a beakful of fur and fly away. This he did not like and he finally hid from them until the nest was finished. I had been right in giving a girl's name to Larai, for she laid speckled eggs and, with some help from her mate, hatched 2 ugly fledglings which soon became beautiful. I made up names for them and clipped their wings, and before long they were as tame as their parents. I also found a young gull that had fallen from its nest to the beach below. Gulls make their nests high on the cliffs, in hollow places on the rocks. These places are usually small, and often I had watched a young one teetering on the edge of the nest and wondered why it did not fall. They seldom did. This one, which was white with a yellow beak, was not badly hurt, but he had a broken leg. I took him back to the house and bound the bones together with 2 small sticks and sinew. For a while he did not try to walk. Then, because he was not old enough to fly, he began to hobble around the yard. With the young birds and the old ones, the white gull and Rantu, who was always trotting at my heels, the yard seemed a happy place. If only I had not remembered to talk. If only I had not wondered about my sister Eulape, where she was, and if the marks she had drawn upon her cheeks had proved magical. If they had, she was now married to Kimki and was the mother of many children. She would have smiled to see all of mine, which were